Hey there, Brett here with Quarter Properties, your Myrtle Beach area real estate expert. And we've got some big news for you today. We're going to kind of dig in a little bit to a huge change in the way that listing agreements are set up for sellers with respect to the buyer broker compensation. So in the past, the way it was kind of worked is you'd meet up front with your listing agent and you would come up with an agreed upon fee. Let's say, usually that's somewhere between say 4.5% to 6%, depending on, the level of service you're looking to receive, the level of marketing you're looking to receive on your home, those kind of things. And then what would happen is you'd also kind of agree to let the listing broker take, let's say you listed at 6%, and listing agreement, you agreed to have 3% of that go towards the buyer broker. What would happen is then the listing agent is agreeing to kind of send half the compensation the other way towards the buyer broker. And you'd also have a situation where, okay, let's say the buyer was brought to the table by the listing broker. Well, then they might potentially keep all that 6%, depending on what your agreement was. So at the end of the day, in the past, the up front, you kind of agreed what you were going to allow the listing broker to compensate the buyer broker. That is not the case any longer. So let's take a look at our new forms real quick. So we've got our exclusive right to sell agreement right here. This is the agreement that you'll sit down and go over with your listing agent up front. And some of the things on here you'll negotiate, like when the property is going to come to market, the length of the agreement, how long you're going to give them to sell the home, the listing price, what price you're both agreeing to come out at. But then here on page 2, you'll see the percent of the gross purchase price of the property that you're agreeing to pay the listing broker to sell, okay? And that's going to be fully negotiable, okay? You can see here, that's you and your listing agent, your listing broker, that you're the two that decide what level of service you're going to receive, the marketing you're going to receive, what percent you're going to pay. That is fully negotiable. So you'll kind of go through that and you'll agree as to what you're going to pay your listing broker. That percentage that goes right there, that is only what you are going to pay your listing broker. That has nothing to do with a potential buyer broker fee, okay? Then down here towards the bottom, you can see additional compensation for assisting an unrepresented buyer. So you'll also agree with your listing agent, you'll negotiate and agree upon, okay, if your listing broker brings the buyer, what percentage they would receive for representing that buyer, okay? Now, how is it different? You can see here on the next page, number 7, buyer broker compensation. So listing broker is not authorized to compensate any other buyer broker, okay? Owner can choose to directly negotiate compensation with the buyer broker using a form. We'll look at that in a second. So no longer will the listing broker split half their commission with the buyer broker. That's not the way it's going to work, okay? You as a seller will be in charge of how you compensate and how you agree to compensate any buyer agent that brings a qualified buyer, okay? Now, under number 8, you can offer a concession, okay? You can offer a concession that you and the listing agent can chat about up front. Just like if you were offering a concession, say, hey, I'm going to pay a $2,500 concession because the home needs new paint or new carpet or whatever. So, and then the listing agent can market that. You can do the same thing where you're agreeing up front to offer a concession. And then you've got the option here where the owner agrees to allow that broker to advertise that concession. So you can agree up front to offer a concession and let the listing broker advertise that. But again, that payment is not going to come out of the listing broker's side of the commission. That's going to come directly from you, okay? But so when a buyer, so let's talk about how it works when a buyer sends you, or a buyer's agent sends an offer. So when they send an offer in, you can expect to see it in one of a couple of ways. One is they might, like if you said, hey, I'm offering a 3% concession, it may come in where on the contract in the transaction costs, it may have an amount. Let's say you're selling a $300,000 home. It may say $9,000 in transaction cost, and that amount is allowed to go towards buyer broker compensation. That might be right there on the contract, okay? And that's probably how it's going to work if you've offered up a concession. If you haven't, then we've got this form, compensation agreement sellers to buyer broker. So what will happen is an offer will come in, and then you'll have your purchase price that the buyer's offering, and then you've got this agreement here that the buyer broker is sending you, where you can see that they're asking for a percentage. So let's say you can just kind of anticipate they're probably going to come in at 3%. And so let's say you're selling a $500,000 home, that's $15,000. You may say, okay, hey, I'm willing to pay, if the buyer's offering me full price, $500,000, okay, then I'll pay that. Let's say the buyer's offering you $450,000. It's like, okay, well, I'll take your $450,000, but I'm only going to pay 2% in buyer broker comp. So again, that's where we'll be able to negotiate both sides of that with you and help you make the best decision. At the end of the day, it's all going to come down to your net proceeds. Okay, we'll just plug it into the spreadsheet and say, okay, after after you pay your attorney, you pay your deed stamps, you pay your listing broker fee, you pay your buyer broker fee, all these items, line items, where does that leave you? Okay. Does that leave you netting what you hope to net, yes or no? And then you can make your educated decisions based on that. So that's our big change. No longer will the listing broker be compensating the buyer broker a certain percentage of what was agreed upon up front. At the end of the day, the buyer broker fee will be coming directly from the seller, either on the contract or a little bit separately through this compensation agreement seller to buyer broker. So hold on, let me jump in and say this. You do not have to agree to pay the buyer broker anything. You can agree to pay your listing broker, up front, whatever that fee is. And then when a buyer broker shows up, you do not have to pay anything. And you can force them to work that out with their buyer outside of the contract. So let me just say that you don't have to agree to anything with respect to compensating a buyer broker. Listen, I know this might be a little confusing. We'll be working through this. We'll answer all your questions, make sure you fully understand. And at the end of the day, as a seller, it's all about what you net. Do you receive at the end of the day what is acceptable to you? Yes or no? If not, then we don't take the deal. All right. Hope you like this. If you did, please click the like button. If you want more interesting tips, please subscribe. If you want to shop Myrtle Beach area real estate, we've got the easiest way to do that in the link below. We've also got a link there for you to keep up to date with your home value. And if you'd like to chat, my email and my phone number are right there, and we'll be talking to you soon.